Okay. So we were started discussion on SQL injection tools. So before going with the SQL injection, understand the web scraping tool. So it helps you to gather the information from the websites. Some of the APIs or plugins are available with the Google itself. You can add them in your extensions. You can add them in your extensions. Go to the Chrome web store and search for the scraper. Scraper tool. So many scrapers are available. So which one you want to extract from the existing web pages you can use. So web scraper. You can add to the extension of your web browser and you can apply the scraping, gather the information about the web application. So data scraper, let's go with the miner. Which are the files it is going to extract? Extraction tool that lets you scrape any HTML web page. You can extract tables and lists from any page and upload them to Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. With Scraper, you can export web pages into XLS, CSV, XLSX, or TSV files. So you can add to the Chrome browser. So it is added here. So data scraper is added. So now you are launching the web scraper. Login into the sign in with Google. Scraped. Steps, follow the steps and you can retrieve the set of the information from the scraper. Okay. So now is SQL injection. As the name tells, it is you are trying to attack the directly attacking the database using the SQL queries. SQL injection is also termed to be as a SQL insertion. The main target of this SQL injection is SQL servers. Objective is to obtain
Somebody is waiting, sir.
yes. So objective is to obtain the info while accessing a DB table that may contain personal information. So malicious code is inserted into the web form field or the website's code to make a system executable, execute a command shell or other arbitrary commands. The name tells you are injecting the malicious code into the existing web form fields. So one tool is available, that is Testfire. It's a website, testfire.net, Sql injection, demo test. You can practice this website for demonstration purpose. Demonstration purpose, you can use this website. You can note down demo.testfire.net. Sign in. Usually admin use a username, password is the username. Admin and admin is the username and the password. See, it is logged in by default. Since we user passwords are mentioned for this. This is the account information about a specific account history, deposit, withdraw, so and so. It is recent transaction happen with the things are displaying here. Okay, this is one website, testfire.net. It helps you to apply the injection attack, Sql injection attack. So some certain steps are required to be followed to attack. How the attacker has plan of attack. In the scenario of plan of attack, we have 4 different steps: reconnaissance, scanning and analyzing, exploit, and clear the tracks. Similarly, social engineering attacks have the similar kind of life cycle. Similarly, any kind of attack, usually it has a 4 steps. Here, similarly, the SQL also, which will have a 4 steps, some steps to be followed. Attacker looks for the web pages that allow submitting data. So, as we discussed in google.com, URL type is login.html. The sites which has the input type equal to input type equal to URL and it has the login forum, it is going to be listed. Usually the login forum, it is able to get the accept the input from the user. So username and password, it will accept the input from the user. HTML commands such as post and get by checking the site source code. So if you go this one, when you go with sign in, it is accepting username and password. So what kind of method this pages uses to check that right click on any of the web pages, view page source, and try to find the form fields and action. So which is the method it is used? Get method. It uses get method. Try to find the view page source. How to right click on the any web page, view page source. It is going to display the HTML code of form ID method action. So method here get is used. Find it for whether it is uses post or get methods by checking the site's source code. It is a first method. First method is the website which is able to accept the user data through the submission fields like text field, radio button, any kind of check boxes. It is accepting the user information. Then next, try to find the HTML forum tag. If forum tag is there, try to find which method they are using, either get method or post method. Then checks the source code of HTML and looks for forum tag. So forum tag, whether it is available or not, look into here. Or you can search for the forum. So it is going to locate here. Then inputs a single quote under the text box provided on the web page to accept the username and password. Check for username and password. Usually here PD Rospan. You can check here username. Username is available. Input type is text. ID is UID, name, value. So password, the name is PASSW. This checks inputs a single quote under the text box provided on the web page to accept the username and password. This checks whether the user input variable is sanitized or interpreted literally by the server. So try to input the characters single quote.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So some are waiting in lobby. Can you please admit them, sir?
So you are going to check by inputting the fields as single quotes. Single quote. Try to log on. Login failed. We are sorry, but this username or password was not so found in our system. You can think that single quote user ID or password is not available. It is indirectly it is giving the hint of it. Then this checks whether the user input variable is sanitized or interpreted literally by the server. If the response is an error message, then the website is found to be susceptible to injection attack. So since you are able to get the error message from the server, no guarantee it is going, we can compromise the database, but there is a possibility of SQL injection attack. So then after knowing that, it uses the command such as select or insert. Usually, obviously, this definitely it is going to connect with the database. That's why you are unable to match the username or password you sent as a single quote messages, right? Then you assume that there is a chances of SQL injection attack either by using the select query or by using the insert query. Then next step, using SQL injection, attacker can obtain some basic info if the purpose of the attack is reconnaissance. It means that to obtain or retrieve the specific information, if you are trying to use the SQL injection, what is the purpose of SQL injection attack? To gain the information gathering, which are the accounts are resided in the databases. Then to get directory listing and to ping an IP address. So to obtain some basic info if the purpose of the attack is reconnaissance. So if the purpose of attack is information gathering, now where exactly that database file is present in the directory, like MySQL server slash BMSIT. BMSIT is the main database slash schema slash mca.mdb or mca.sql. Fetch the path of the directory listing of that database, then ping an IP address of that database. Try to find out in which system that database is resided by using the ping or by scanning by applying the Nmap tool to scan the servers, not servers, network. So may gain access to the DB by obtaining username and password. To get user listing, select star from users where name equal to within double quotes capital O or R 1 within single quote 1 equal to 1. Select star from users. You are compromising the database which consisting of username and password by injecting this SQL statement. You are trying to access all the username and password which is present in the database. Since the condition is whatever the username here, because you use the R password, 1 equal to 1, literally 1 equal to 1 is true. So this part of the R is true. This part of the R might be true or may not be true. That is, either it is false or true, but right part of the R condition is true. When it is R condition is true, where condition satisfy, then it is going to be listing all the username and password which is present in the users table. Then add new data to the DB by executing insert command. If you want to insert any new value or records into the table. Then modify data currently in the database, then execute update command. So once the database is compromised, you can play as you decide. These are the steps involved in injection attack. So which are the steps? First, attacker should look for the web pages. It allows us to submit some data. If yes, then try to know about the HTML source code which has the forum field, which with the method either post or get method. Then input some of the code under the text provided by checking whether the server is responding for our input or not. You check with admin 123 some password. give the input. So server is responding that. So definitely there is a database is there. We can try for SQL injections. Then after that, with the help of select or insertion, you can inject. The next step is using SQL injection, attacker can gather the information about where exactly the database is present in the directory of that system and which system has the database. Try to fetch the IP address of that system which has the database. Then you can gain the access by injecting this SQL query, that is select star from. If you obtain the user information, users table, you are fetching username and password which is present in the users by applying this query. This is one sample query which is discussed here. There are several kind of attacks you can perform using SQL injections. That's the one. The another is blind SQL injection. So it is used when a web application is vulnerable to SQL injection, but the results of the injection are not visible to the attacker. So it is vulnerable. You can attack onto the database, but results of that expressions are not visible to the attacker. That is termed to be as a blind SQL. It is nothing but select star from users where previous query where name equal to blank or 1 equal to 1. So it is going to fetch all the data present in the users table and it is going to store as a object but not visible to the attacker. Query will execute but not visible to the attacker. It is termed to be as a blind SQL injection. Again, attacker has to recover such objects by doing reverse engineering process. So how to prevent SQL injection attack? Attack occur due to poor websites, administrations and coding, steps to prevent from attack. So attack occur due to poor websites. As you've seen here, the demo.testfire.net, it's IBM related website. They have provided this website for practicing of SQL injections. You can by providing admin single quote 1 single quote equal to single quote 1 single quote. Syntax error. Okay, so default username and password given by them is admin and admin. You can enter into the website directly. Hello admin user. So it is showing some of the user accounts. This is for demonstration only. So view account summary, view transactions, transfer mode, etc. and so on. Edit users. Right. This is a one. It's a poorly designed website just for practices purpose. Then. So how you can prevent the SQL injection attack? So first you do input validation. So as you've seen, when sign in. When you go with view page source, method equal to get is used. Try to avoid the get in the form field. What happens if you use the get? If you submit the sensitive information like this, if you submit the sensitive information, that is visible onto the URL bar. That is visible onto the URL bar. So try to avoid the get methods, use the post methods. 1. That is input validation. Do input validation. Replace all single quotes to 2 single quotes. You do the validation in such a way, replace all single quoted text fields, by single double quote. Suppose if you are using a single quote here, go to inspection tool. Suppose here, if you are using a single quote in the coding style, you use the single quote of double, means single quote. Use that style of coding the website. Then sanitize the input. That is, user inputs needs to be checked and cleaned of any characters or string that could possibly be used maliciously. So sanitize the input means when you are using the username password, and password, try to avoid some predefined names like admin 1 2 3 4, like that. Try to avoid. Numeric value should be checked. So for example, if you are accepting the age information of a particular student or the customer, usually according to the law, above 18 years student or the customer can do the financial transaction over the commercial site. So you do the validation, check against their accounts. If they are not found to be legal or valid, then reject the transaction. So numerical validation you need to be done. Then keep all text boxes and form fields as short as possible to limit the length of the user input. So if you are giving, so give the feedback about a particular browsing experience about the browser. See, one can write only 100 characters. Another can write only few 5 to 10 characters. Excellent, very good, like that. Some people are there, they start writing history like more than 1,000, 10,000 characters. So if you allow them to write such longer strings, the SQL, because how you are defining the field sizes, usually the field sizes are static in nature. If you are allowing to enter more number of characters as intended, suppose if you fix the size of 200 character maximum by that address line or the feedback description box, it will accept 200 and remaining is going to throw the exception, index out of bound exception, it will be thrown, or size exception it will be thrown. In such case, the attacker will understand that by they are applying the brute force method of attacking, if they allow to enter maximum size of exceeded the maximum size, if that database throwing error means there is a chances we can try for attack through that error. And also it is recommended that not to show the database error out to the outside world, not to show the database error to the outside world. That is modify error reports. Modify error reports. Like SQL error should not be displayed to the outsider users. In so and so number, say observe here, when we applied this in sign in page. So when we are showing this one, this is not general message. When you go with this one, it is showing the error, syntax error encountered in 1 at line number 1, column 67. This is actually the syntax error of the query string. What we passed here is some string I passed relevant to query. When the query is trying to fetch, it is throwing the error. It should not show to the user. If it show, the attacker understand that I can try to go with the SQL injection attack to gain the access of the database by some combinations of the queries. So avoid to display the error content onto a outsider users. Outsider user means if Amazon is the company, who are the outsider? We are the outsider. If BMSIT is the institution, who are the outsiders? Public. We are the insider, but outsiders are publics. Other preventions needs to be followed is SQL Server 2000 never be used. SQL Server 2000, if you are using that as a database server for your system, definitely you will be under trouble because most SQL injection attack was exist with this server. Means not safe to use for commercial purpose. Isolate DB server and web server. So don't keep both the database server and web server in the same system. Try to use the different server machines to maintain. Database server is one server, and the web server is the another different server. Don't keep both in the same server machine. Then extended stored procedures are not used or have unused triggers, stored procedures, user defined functions, etc. Then these should move to an isolated server. So if you are writing the query such a that built-in stored procedure means triggers. If you are writing the triggers in your database like stored procedure, either a call or the routine. So if you use any of one of the triggers, even the malicious code can be injected onto those query statements, and they can trigger and compromise your databases. So instead of storing all the procedures in a single machine in the database server, so there is a chance. That's why isolate them. Those stored procedures should be maintained in some other machine or the location and use them for your database servers through the web server. Means try to maintain in different machines about the stored procedures as well as the database server and the web server. What for it is needed? To avoid the SQL injection or to prevent the SQL injection. Any doubt in that SQL injection? Any doubt? Fine. So on save attendance. So in the next class, we are going to discuss about the buffer overflow. If time permits, we will discuss now today itself. Otherwise, next week. Next week means tomorrow. Okay. So another good example of SQL injection, you can look into the scenario of this, how exactly it is going to be works in pictorially. Hacker present here is writing the, you can observe the arrow marks also, sequence of arrow marks. From here, he is writing the query such that union is used to combine with the existing query. If already query is there in the system, it is combining, union is used to combine the existing query with the new query which is written by the hacker. Once this query is written, before writing the query, you need to gather the information of whether that user's table is exist with the database or not. You need to be checked. So if no user table means, obviously there it will throw the error, that object not found error. So once if it is present, you are injecting that query to the user forum. User is going to submit the values to the forum. So once values is submitted with this query injection, how it is going to work like this: select name, description from product. Again, one more table where category is a field in the product table is gifts, union. So union is used, that query is appended with this gift. Select username, password from users. See, if category equal to gift is present, content is present, union is combination of the records, it is going to be fetched along with username and password. So usually passwords are not plain text. While storing the passwords in the database, they are encrypted. You are going to get the hashes of the passwords using this injection attack. Then you can use the password cracker tool to retrieve the passwords from the collected hashes. So in that you are trying to gain the information of usernames, because username and password is going to be retrieved by appending the additional query statement to the existing query statement. This is about some injection attack. You can watch this for what is exactly the SQL injection.
In this video, we'll explain what SQL injection is, describe some common vulnerabilities, explain how to find and exploit SQL injection, and summarize ways to prevent the vulnerability from happening. SQL injection is a web security vulnerability that allows an attacker to interfere with the queries that an application makes to its database. It generally allows an attacker to view data that they are not normally able to retrieve. This might include data belonging to other users or any other data that the application itself is able to access. In many cases, an attacker can modify or delete this data, causing persistent change to the application's content or behavior. In some situations, an attacker can escalate an SQL injection attack to compromise the underlying server or other back-end infrastructure, or perform a denial of service attack. Consider a shopping application that displays products in different categories. When the user clicks on the gifts category, their browser requests this URL. This causes the application to make an SQL query to retrieve details of the relevant products from the database. This SQL query asks the database to return all details from the products table where the category is gifts and released is 1. The restriction that released is 1 is being used to hide products that are not released. For unreleased products, presumably released is 0. The application doesn't implement any defenses against SQL injection attacks, so an attacker can construct an attack like this, which results in this SQL query. The key thing here is that the double dash sequence is a comment indicator in SQL and means that the rest of the query is interpreted as a comment. This effectively removes the remainder of the query, meaning that all products are displayed, including unreleased products. Going further, the attacker can cause the application to display all the products in any category, including categories they don't know about. To do this, the attacker can send this attack, which results in this SQL query. The modified query will return all items where either the category is gifts or 1 is equal to 1. Since 1 equals 1 is always true, the query will return all items. Consider an application that lets users log in with a username and password. If a user submits the username wiener and the password blue cheese, the application checks the credentials by performing this SQL query. If the query returns the details of a user, then the login is successful. If not, then the login is rejected. In this situation, an attacker can log in as any user without a password, simply by using the SQL comment sequence to remove the password check from the where clause of the query. If the attacker submits the username administrator quote dash dash, then the application performs this SQL query. This query returns the user whose username is administrator and successfully logs the attacker in as that user. In cases where the results of an SQL query are returned within the application's responses, an attacker can leverage an SQL injection vulnerability to retrieve data from other tables within the database. This is done using the union keyword, which lets you execute an additional select query and append the results to the original query. If an application executes this query containing the user input gifts, then an attacker can submit this input. This will cause the application to return all usernames and passwords along with the names and descriptions of products. When you discover an SQL injection vulnerability, it's generally useful to obtain some information about the database itself. This information can often pave the way for further exploitation. You can query the version details for the database. The way that this is done depends on the database type, so you can infer the database type from whichever technique works. For example, on Oracle, you can execute this query to show the database version. You can also determine what database tables exist and which columns they contain. For example, on most databases, you can execute this query to list the tables in the database. Many instances of SQL injections are blind vulnerabilities. This means that the application does not return the results of the SQL query or the details of any database errors within its responses. Blind vulnerabilities can still be exploited to access unauthorized data, but the techniques involved are generally more complicated and difficult to perform. Depending on the nature of the vulnerability and the database involved, a variety of techniques can be used to exploit blind SQL injection vulnerabilities. You can change the logic of the query to trigger a detectable difference in the application's response, depending on the truth of a single condition. This might involve injecting a new condition into some Boolean logic, or conditionally triggering an error such as a divide by 0. You can conditionally trigger a time delay in the processing of the query, allowing you to infer the truth of the condition based on the time that the application takes to respond. You can also trigger an out-of-band network interaction. This technique is extremely powerful and works in situations where the other techniques do not. Often, you can directly exfiltrate data via the out-of-band channel, for example, by placing the data into a DNS lookup for a domain that you control. The majority of SQL injection vulnerabilities can be found quickly and reliably using Burp Suite's Web Vulnerability Scanner. You can find SQL injection vulnerabilities manually by using a systematic set of tests against every entry point in the application. You can submit the single quote character and look for errors or other anomalies. You can submit some SQL-specific syntax and look for systematic differences in the resulting application responses. You can submit Boolean conditions and look for differences in the application's responses. You can submit payloads designed to trigger time delays and look for differences in the time taken to respond. And you can submit payloads designed to trigger an out-of-band network interaction and monitor for any resulting interactions. Most SQL injection vulnerabilities arise within the where clause of a select query. This type of SQL injection is generally well understood by experienced testers, but SQL injection vulnerabilities can in principle occur at any location within the query and within different query types. The most common other locations where SQL injection arises are in update statements within the updated values or the where clause, in insert statements within the inserted values, in select statements within the table or column name, and in select statements within the order by clause. First order SQL injection arises where the application takes the user input from an HTTP request and in the course of processing that request, incorporates the input into an SQL query in an unsafe way. In second order SQL injection, also known as stored SQL injection, the application takes user input from an HTTP request and stores it for future use. This is usually done by placing the input into a database, but no vulnerability arises at the point where the data is stored. Later, when handling a different HTTP request, the application retrieves the stored data and incorporates it into an SQL query in an unsafe way. Second order SQL injection often arises in situations where developers are aware of SQL injection vulnerabilities and so safely handle the initial placement of the input into the database. When the data is later processed, it is deemed to be safe since it was previously placed into the database safely. At this point, the data is handled in an unsafe way because the developer wrongly deems it to be trusted. Some core features of the SQL language are implemented in the same way across popular database platforms, and so many ways of detecting and exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities work identically on different types of database. However, there are also many differences between common databases. These mean that some techniques for detecting and exploiting SQL injection work differently on different platforms. Differences between databases arise in areas like syntax for string concatenation, comments, batched or stack queries, platform-specific APIs, and error messages. Most instances of SQL injection can be prevented by using parameterized queries instead of string concatenation within the query. This code is vulnerable to SQL injection because the user input is concatenated directly into the query. The code can be easily rewritten in a way that prevents the user input from interfering with the query structure. Parameterized queries can be used for any situation where untrusted input appears as data within the query, including the where clause and values in an insert or update statement. They can't be used to handle untrusted input in other parts of the query, such as table or column names or the order by clause. Application functionality that places untrusted data into those parts of the query will need to take a different approach, such as whitelisting permitted input values or using different logic to deliver the required behavior. For a parameterized query to be effective in preventing SQL injection, the string that is used in the query must always be a hard-coded constant and must never contain any variable data from any origin. Don't be tempted to decide case by case whether an item of data is trusted. It is all too easy to make mistakes about the possible origin of data or for changes in other code to violate assumptions about what data is tainted.
Sir left ಆದ್ರಲ್ವಾ?
Hello. Any questions are there relevant to SQL injection? I hope I made you understand about SQL injection. You can follow that twice, thrice. You watch that, you will be able to understand very clearly. And also, you can refer the PPT.